Hi everybody. Hi everybody. This is part 3 on trailer loading. I'm sorry for the late beginning. Sorry for the inconvenience. We will have one more session tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, and we will have that would be part 4, and then the 5th installment on Thursday, East Coast time, 9 o'clock. And for now, that'll just have to be enough. I hope in 5 hours I can give you enough background, enough thought, inspiration, perhaps, a few anecdotal reminders that your emergency isn't necessarily your horse's agenda or obligation to fulfill and remedy. For today, hi everybody. I just want to mention I had a couple of unexpected things happen today. Not that I need feedback or empathy, but I did barely get back here had a flat tire this morning. And then knowing I would have no time to make lunch because of this contingency, I stopped at a wonderful little restaurant, got some soup, and they served it at 225 degrees Fahrenheit, and my mouth is blistered from front to back and left to right, and my tongue is also. So I found out that I'm lisping a little bit, and I just want you to know it. Otherwise, I'm fine. I've got a glass of ice here. It doesn't need to be mentioned again, but I want you to know that I'm perhaps a little bit more impaired than usual in the speaking department. So please forgive me. I'm a bit challenged, and when you hear the ice rattling, I'm not sure if that's what you're supposed to do for a burned mouth, but I have not another idea at the moment. I'm not going to, and also I left my glasses in the car, so I'm going to have to imagine what you're saying there because I can't see it. So I'm a little bit, got a little handicap today on the presentation, but I'm pretty clear on what I'd like to talk about. We are going to pick up, okay, it's now 3:14. I'm going to stop at 4:14 as promised. I have not always the right situation here, but anyway, as my father raised me to believe, the show must go on. So here we go. I left you yesterday with some new information. I listened to it again. I have not had a chance to listen to part 1 to see what I might want to correct in there or enhance with some other detail. But for sure, tonight I will listen to what you have to say. Nobody seems to be writing me any questions at my email, so if there's something you need to ask, you just go ahead and ask it on here while it's on your mind. I might as well just go along with that plan because I can't answer it here because I can't actually read your questions here. So, but I will read them tonight when I get my glasses, and we'll take it from there. I want to talk about the unloading process and the actual stepping up and getting in process. We've talked about tying to a degree, although I haven't shown you knots. This is not, I'm making this as full service as I can, but for heaven's sakes, you can look up a bowline on my website or on YouTube or somewhere. You can find all the knots you want. I'm going to just tell you the main knots that I use, and you can look them up. I don't know, of course, the equivalent translations in all the languages of those of you who participate on here, and I must say I'm really happy that you do. The main knots I use a bowline often. I use a half hitch. I use a square knot. I use a double half hitch. I use a clove hitch, CLOVE, like the spice. That's about it, really. There's a couple of running knots I use. That's all you need to know. Square knot, bowline, double half hitch, clove hitch, what some people call a shoelace knot or half of a shoelace knot, and then I'll put a half hitch over that and lock it down with a chain stitch, depending on how long a rope I have or what else is going on. One thing I will mention in terms of tying your horses with long lines and your 12-foot or 14 or 18-foot leads, be sure, really, really sure, that you tie up the extra line. If you've got it hanging out your trailer, there is no more upsetting thing for a horse than to have himself snubbed right up to the roof of your trailer or the window because you've left it long enough to get tied in your axle, by the way. Let's just remember that one. Good to avoid that. You make sure that if you're going to tie your rope on the outside of the trailer, that you check it before and after you fuel up or stop anywhere in a public place. Don't leave your horses unattended without checking them before you get back in that rig. That includes your doors, your windows. It includes the bumper hitch. It includes everything. And when I'm traveling, I don't leave my horses unlocked. I don't leave my doors unlocked. I don't trust anybody out there at those rest stops and trailer parks and gas stations. Just forget it. You just mind your stuff, and, you know, I would not assume anything about any knot or latch or switch or rope or anything when you're traveling. You just mind your stuff. That's pretty much what you would want to do. I think, from my experience, it seems to be the best plan. Okay, so let's talk about the horse that actually will get himself halfway up in there and then back out because either you taught him that or somebody else taught him that that was what was expected. I'll say, unfortunately, that what that does is it sort of starts to separate the horse's understanding between getting in and getting halfway in. And if you are a clear thinker, you'll understand that it's kind of hard for him to think he should use his hips if you don't teach him that in the beginning. So what often happens in the beginning is that people will load a horse, the front end will come right in, you'll put some feed there or he'll follow you in, and then there'll be a lot of patting and waiting and congratulating and maybe some pulling to try to get some more steps going. But actually, you can't really convince a horse that he operates in this world by dragging himself along by his front legs, because in fact he doesn't. In order for a horse to move a front foot in without you at his head or somebody hauling on him in the front, in order for him to be motivated to move a front foot, he's either going to move a front foot when he's grazing to make it more possible to reach the ground, drop his little colt head or foal head low enough by getting his legs as far apart as they can in the front, his little butt sticking up in the back. He'll move his front legs for those types of reasons. But once he's a little bigger and he can get around on his own and his neck reaches the ground better, he's going to move a front foot because a back foot is coming up behind it and he doesn't want to step on himself. One only need to review the cadence of the footfall at a walk to understand that a back foot moves a front foot on the same side, and a front foot either side reaching forward will draw the opposite hind up behind it to reestablish a diagonal point of balance across which his weight, or under saddle your combined weight, can pass into the next step or stride or whatever you got going. Transition could be up or down, but in other words, the horse is going to be inclined to move from back to front, and the lighter the forehand is allowed to remain in his domestic life, the more control you're going to have over his ability to follow the feel of your leading rein or supporting rein, or your line of sight, however you choose to ride. Whatever aids you choose to emphasize or depend on in combination. He's going to be a lot more able to do your bidding and to fulfill your expectations and your assignments if you have not compromised him through socialization that's confusing, setups to fail that require punishment at the head and neck for the things he's been actually at other times rewarded and encouraged to do, and also the very famous trailer loading mistake, which is to bring the front end in, get the front end out, get the front end in, get the front end out, and do that until he thinks that that's the job. Once a horse has been taught that, it's very hard for him to understand how to get his back feet in behind those front feet, because the front feet have only been asked to take a step or two in. And he rests there, heavy on front with his back feet hanging out behind, often with the right hind extended back on left-sided horses that have been handled by right-handed people pretty much exclusively. You'll see that right hip hang back at all times of the day, at all times of rest, at all times of intermission between other assignments. That hip will usually hang back. So anyway, you want to overcome that. The easiest thing that people do is they get someone to come up in behind with a rope or, some sort of encouragement, a flag, kissing to them, clicking to them, clapping their hands, throwing gravel. People do all kinds of stuff to get the horses up in there, but the point is, until you fortify his confidence with experience, which means that you show him that what you really want is for him to walk up in there after you. It's very hard for him to be sure of that. If you take up 2 steps, turn around, pat him in the face after he's got his front legs up there, there's no reason for him to think he should come in after you and knock you over. In most of these trailers, there's not really enough room, particularly if you've got a western hat on or you've got winter clothing. It's not real inspiring to try to crowd into you when his experience of crowding has always been corrected with some kind of reprimand or punishment or change in your mood or tonality. All these things discourage a horse from doing what he thinks you're asking him to do anyway, and it makes them, in the end, it makes them second guess themselves or get kind of depressed that they're never really okay to follow what you want because there's a correction on the end of it, and that gets very distressing to them, and finally they just kind of dull down and tune out and establish some sort of inner life of their own, which either is or isn't productive. One will never know, because the silent ones are not ones that are well understood in most cases. That includes your animals. So it's best to really get that horse understanding how to drive up in there, or you get in a big enough trailer in the beginning that he can actually follow you in and make sense of the assignment. The horse that I read about that absolutely, I think it was Jackie Decker, you said you've got 3 that you've actually taught how to get up in there through long experience as foals and as young horses, just walking in and eating out of there and edging their way in and all that. Well, I don't know whether these 2 are ones that you've had in that situation or not. But if you've got a horse that absolutely will not lift up a leg, won't lift up a front leg, I'd start looking at what's happening on the other front foot. Are they standing on their bars? What kind of surface are you working on? Is all the weight, they have bars and frogs that are, you got your horse high centered on your hoof and the wall is low? I'm sorry, but this is something I see too much. The horses have either worn or had their walls have been worn off. They've had their hoof walls trimmed back to the point where whoever's doing the work doesn't think that it's kosher to touch the sole or the bars or the frog with a knife, and so they end up just kind of high-centered on the inside of their foot, and that's extremely, extremely painful. So generally, if a horse makes a decision to say no, I look for the reason, because there is one. When you got 2 horses that are saying no, there are either 2 separate reasons that are legitimate, or there's the same reason and that isn't clear to you. So I'd look a little harder, Jackie. If you're pulling up on a halter that squeezes the nose, that'll be a good reason for them not to come. If you're trying to load them with a stud chain either under the chin or over the nose, another good reason not to come. Pain does not encourage forward motion unless that pain, well, it's kind of a tricky thing. I mean, you can spur a horse forward. That's pain that's back behind the drive line. You can whip a horse forward. That's back behind the drive line. But don't forget that it brings the attention back. And I really would like to encourage you not to think about creating pain to produce partnership. It's a kind of funny equation there. Let's try to think of another way to look at it. You might say, well, I've got the partnership, or I don't care about the partnership, I just want him motivated. He'd be a lot more motivated if you ask and allow that intelligence he was born with to organize around a well-timed response that you just take a couple of breaths and give him time to deliver, instead of keeping your foot on the darn pedal all the way to the floor without giving him a chance to think or breathe, because the circumstances in your life have created that. The horse is kind of hanging out waiting for you to get into his world. But when you bring too much of your world into his world, just as you do with someone else, someone you really care about, and the next thing you know, they're giving you a blank look, and the next thing you know, they're walking out the door. That happens. Horrible. You get too involved with your troubles or your work, and you don't really even take enough time for yourself. You're sure not going to have time for a horse either. Not real time, not the kind of time that will let him reach for you and show you through his behavior what fun it is to be with you. This is the point of the deal. You know, is for him to enjoy you as much as you enjoy him. You're going to have a much safer experience, and it'll fill you up just like a helium balloon. You won't believe how good it feels. But there's nothing that's more annoying to have an unprepared horse at the back of a trailer to tell you, go pound sand. Good for you. Go to the show by yourself. Get in your car and go. I'm standing here. This is not funny. And it's also, depending on if you give your power to that horse and you lose your emotional grip on the moment, it's just an unproductive exchange. So I'll really encourage you that if that is where you're likely to go, that you be honest about it and you get somebody to do it for you. Train your horse to load, and then they can show you what that horse has learned. There is no honor lost in being honest about who you are at a moment. You know, people's lives change. People go through tremendous, tremendous changes in the course of a lifetime. Up, down, around, back, happy, sad, and in between. I mean, life is not a flat line. Let's hope not. So you want to try to be as candid with yourself and as straightforward with yourself about where you really are, instead of just thumping on the horse for being who he is. He's always going to be trying to look for the right way to get along with you until he's shown that there's no point. Now, I really mean that. That horse is going to give you a long, long, long line to run on. And I have found out by being around many people who handle horses differently that it's a really good idea to give them the benefit of the doubt and to understand that a lot of what you might not like about a horse is the mark of the person who was there last. Not even that animal. But horses are very, very apt to take on the last lesson they had and really take it to heart. Just think about it for days and months and weeks. They will. They do. They don't forget much. Mule forgets even less, but a horse remembers well what happens. So you want to just make sure to have a little bit of humility when you go toward these animals and you know you've wronged them or you've taught them things you wish you hadn't. It never hurts to start with just a little apology and take a fresh start. You know, it's really hard when you've had horses that have been sick or trained by the wrong person and returned to you as a basket case. A horse you don't even recognize. This is a heartbreaker. I've had it happen. Believe me, I've seen it happen to my friends, and I've had it happen to me, and it's just, thank God, not recently, but I've made some mistakes. I have never sent a horse out for training, but I didn't have the power to take the lead rope back when I should have a couple of times, and I lived to regret it for the whole life of one horse. It's terrible. So I'm just saying, I share with you the difficulty of being a perfect horse person, because it's really hard. It's really, really hard. You can't do it. You can only be as good as you are in that moment. And I sure want to encourage you to be forgiving of yourself as you go forward, and to really try to notice the small things that are affecting that horse, including how impatient you might be at a time, or how active in his face as you're asking him to go by into a dark place that he has to either step up into or go into that has no other animal in it. So let's get to this idea how we could help him get in by either having another horse in there, even if it is a slant load trailer, or a 4-horse straight ahead, a 2-horse straight ahead, or a big box trailer that's divided in half. It can really help a lot to put another animal in there, even if you just have a cow that's in there, something that's alive and is not stressed, that will say, okay, I'm in here, are you coming? Those are very big encouragements for horses that don't dare put their back feet in. Okay? So if you're alone and you're really out of ideas, you're working alone and you got a long rope, I haven't more than once in 2-horse straight ahead trailers had a long enough rope that could go from the halter knot out the door back to me, so that I could actually rub on that horse's hip and encourage him forward. And then when he got the guts to step up in there, I could just take the slack out. Not pull him through and jerk his head up in the air. You pull him through and jerk his head in the air, it's going to throw his weight on the forehand, and then he's going to jump back out right in your face. But there has to be a happy medium between you pulling him in, being in his way as you do it, getting on the phone and calling helpers, which is not ever going to teach him how to load himself in the first place, and, you know, just trying to scare him in or drive him in with your left hand or your right hand in his eye, up ahead of his eye, trying to lead him, and then you got something smashing him across the back or the rib cage because you don't have a long enough rope or you're not well enough prepared and haven't done your homework. These are the typical scenarios that make a horse and a person both think it's the worst thing in the world to have to get loaded in a trailer. But with some consideration for just basic, solid leading and sending skills, you can easily get over the little impasse that you can have at the back of the trailer and getting that horse to unite in a stride moving forward. So some experimentation will be helpful. Getting another horse inside ahead of there will be helpful. Starting early enough so that you're not in a hurry will be helpful. Having some feed up there for him so that when he does get up in, or if it takes 4 or 5 tries and then he blows out backwards because his experiences before, previous botched up training jobs have caused him to fear and detest the process as well as the end result. All you need is a super trailer loading job and a wonderful, comfortable experience and a bad driver, and you still get the same effect. They don't want to go in. Doesn't matter whether you're the best trailer loader in the world. You got a wrong person at the wheel, you can forget it. The horse has got just as much anxiety about a bad driver as somebody sitting in the passenger seat, you know. So these are things to think about, hopefully ahead of time. I did, like one of you wrote me the other day, I have had a horse get in. It was actually loaded when I got there, and I was doing the driving and the delivery. And I didn't know that horse couldn't back out. I also didn't know it was a horse's first time in a trailer. They managed conveniently to leave that detail out. And I'm sorry to say it was a 6-hour unloading job, of which most of that time was me trying to figure out what to do in the dark. And finally I had to build up a place behind that trailer so that horse could back out without any change in elevation. And I used 2 pallets and a 3/4 inch sheet of exterior plywood to make a ramp, and then in the end he had to step down. He got on that. It took me several hours to get that situation thought about, assembled, nailed together, or screwed together so that the plywood didn't start flipping around on the pallets. And then after he was on that plywood, he could turn around and I didn't care what he did after that. It turned out okay. It wasn't anything I'd want to do twice. But I had to, in the end, from the stall that was next to him, he was in there by himself. It was a mare. She was in there by herself. And I actually had to back those feet out one at a time. I didn't have ropes on those feet. It was too dark, really. I just basically picked up those feet, after I got that platform made. Once I got her all the way to the end, she jammed up back in there, almost put herself over the chest bar. It can be extremely trying to get a horse out once they're in. If you put too much pressure on them, sometimes they'll flatten you against the chest bar and really hurt you. What you want to make sure that they don't do is try to turn around and flip over that divider, get themselves hung up, facing out in the other stall with their stifles and their hips still hung up in the stall they were in. They're twisted that way. That's not a good one. So you don't want to ever encourage a horse to look over his back in the empty stall. Start contemplating that move, because they will if there's too much pressure and there's too much stress. And never hurts to add time. I will encourage you to find out as much about what that horse knows before you get him committed, before you get yourself committed to a situation that could possibly be dangerous for you. Like I said yesterday, the number of reasons that people get anxious about trailering, and this does not matter what kind of trailer you have. It does not matter. The whole topic is often upsetting and kind of mysterious and kind of anxiety-producing to many people, because there's a misconception that it has something to do with the trailer. Aside from the fact that a bad driver can get a horse upset about trailering, the process of trailer loading is really the sum of the parts of whatever other experiences he has in his daily life with the people who manage him. And that would involve very, very simple things. The basics: going forward, going back, going left with the shoulders, going right with the shoulders, perhaps stepping left or right with the hips to get straight behind the trailer, or come up on a ramp from the side, depending on how you've parked or what the other circumstances are that are affecting the situation. We're just talking about the basics here. You want to be able to lift the head up and down. You want to have separated a change in posture, with the head and neck able to be adjusted without meaning that the feet have to also go in that direction. So you separate posture from movement of the whole body. Just the same way you would if you were going to answer a phone that was over on a desk. You wouldn't have to run in a 90-degree turn to get to that phone if your arm worked. You could look at the phone. You could look over in response to the sound. Your shoulder would open in that direction. Hopefully your hand works. You pick that thing up and answer it. These are the types of things that somehow this logic that should prevail in an assignment like this. Let's load the horse and go somewhere. The logic is suspended in many people for some reason, because I think that it becomes rather alarming to, and in many times impossible to admit, that your lack of a grip on the basics is so extreme that you can't combine the information you and the horse share together into a way that allows you to stick him in a trailer. You invite him or tell him to go in either way, but if you can't get it done without a battle or 3 or 4 people coming to your assistance, it means that the basics between you are not clear. It doesn't get more complicated than that. That is a simple fact, in my opinion. I'm sure there were exceptions to that. I'm sure there are many examples that I could be shown or told about that would cause me to, maybe think another way. But really, in the end, if your horse can lead, just lead him in the trailer. If you can lunge your horse, send him in there. I do want to mention this getting out part, because often, and I've never really understood why, there's a lot of urgency. People get where they're going, and then 1, 2, 3, bam, get them out, drop the thing. Hey, let's hurry up. Okay, boop, boop. People will do this before they have a cigarette, before they have lunch, before they have a cup of coffee, before they make the phone call that they're supposed to make, or text somebody to say they're arrived. 1, 2, 3, 4, bam, get him out, boom. And then you tie him up above his head, go into the thing, and then you realize you look out the restaurant and he's flipping out on the side of your trailer. I mean, could you leave him in there for 20 minutes and let him get used to the sounds and the smells around there? I think what people might benefit from sometimes is just taking a little breath and thinking about the circumstances and the changes that are about to happen or have just happened before you get to where you're going, from the horse's point of view. You know, I mean, there's nothing wonderful about the experience of a horse that can't be in a trailer by himself or with another horse for 3 minutes without starting to paw and shake and buck in place so that you are on schedule to run over and get him out as he has been trained to do. So I'm encouraging you really to take a whole other look at this international trailer loading crisis that is just a little bit too visible everywhere. It is no more than the sum of the errors that are missed and that the horse is able to fill in for that take place between you all day long, from one end of the week to the next. So about the time that you handle your horse on the left, but actually you lead him with his nose in the center of your back, there's a place that won't work, and it's right smack at the back of your trailer. When you lead him up in there, and he puts his front feet in there, you turn around to look at him and wonder why he doesn't come. And he says, well, if I come, I'm going to slap you right in the back of that trailer, run you over, and there'll be hell to pay for that. And I'm not doing it because, first of all, you're in my way, and second of all, I've always been told I'm wrong when I'd crowd you. So these are the things that don't get thought about. And I know this is the third day in the row I'm mentioning this small thing, but I'm kind of got an idea there might be some new people on here, and maybe it doesn't hurt to be reminded a little bit that we need to be able to go seamlessly. That means easily, without interruptions or halting or feeling uncoordinated, or without getting all messed up and tangled in your rope and in your horse's way. To be able to lead a horse on your left means you have him in your left hand. You are on his right. To lead a horse in your right hand, you are on his left. I'm going to discuss a short exercise here that is something many people find difficult to do, but I'm going to encourage it. You lead your horse on your right. Your hip is not crowding his shoulder. Your elbow is not in his neck. Your chain is not jerking across his nose. He's actually following on the right. You're on his left. He's on your right. There is a space between, if you were to walk in the mud or the snow, you'll see that if you're doing it correctly, there will be a space between the outside of your right foot and the outside of his left feet, front and back. That means that there will also be a margin of respect and a margin of deliberate buffer, and his understanding of walking parallel behind you, but side by side, but back and away from you, so that he's not overlapping your line of travel. Why that's important? Because if he spooks or bolts or something scares him and he's in the habit of moving along with his nose between your shoulder blades, you're likely to get run down in that case. I know many, 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 countless people that have been run down by horses, and it's not a good idea. And it's also one of these avoidable things. So, if you're planning on having a long-term safe relationship with that horse, teach him to stand beside you and walk behind you. From that position, in your right hand, as you're walking along, you can redirect his forehand by putting your right hand, as you shorten up that lead rope a little bit, you put that right hand right over behind your own left hip bone, kind of behind your back. And when you turn around to your right, he should already be well on his way with a forehand to the left, removing the possibility that you could actually confront him, because he's already starting a circle to the right by shifting his forehand left out of your way. Seamlessly, you then go from leading to lunging. Once you replay that, you draw that picture for yourself on a piece of paper, you'll see what I mean. Then, let's say you lunge him around in a circle to the right, and you want to go back to leading. I would wait for that hip to pass you by, and I'd drop about a 2 or 3 foot coil of rope as you head off, not quickly. You drop some after you want to head out of the center of your circle, you go past his tail. He'll be able to come off the circle toward the inside and follow you with an open shoulder so that you don't have to jerk him or yank on him or set him up to get heavy in front and face up and kind of empty out on the forehand. That exercise right there will be the best one for you to be able to lead and load your horse in a seamless way if you have to send him past you in the middle of leading because things change, or the footing or the wind, or maybe some other horse just comes out too fast ahead of, maybe somebody else just loaded a horse and he backs up right in your face. Well, if you're leading up in there and you think that horse is secure and he's not, I have more than once come into a stock trailer and had a horse on the way out blow right past us. Horse pulled loose, or somebody's knot didn't work, or there's 100 reasons it can happen. But anyway, I'm just saying, if you're not ready, you're not prepared for the unexpected, as Brian said the other day, you'll find out, with too little preparation too late, and sometimes you get banged up, sometimes you don't, but anyway, sometimes you can get your heart rate going. And all of these avoidable things are just going to be the process of trial and error. I'm trying to mention some things that will help you. Let me see, does anybody want me, I'm going to see if I can read on here. Does anybody want me to say again about how you go from leading to lunging? Does anybody want to hear that one more time? I can do it from the left side, from being on his right side. I'm going to wait and see if you guys want to hear any more about that, or should I keep going? I got a lot to cover here. Okay, there's one yes. Let me see. Okay, there's a couple yeses. Okay, there's a couple yeses. Okay, I'm going to try it again. Would you people... Lisa. I know, Lisa, you have it. I know that. Okay, listen. Would you please get a pen and paper or pencil now? You draw this, please. I'm going to tell you how to draw it. Because. Just grab a pencil and paper, please. I'll give you a minute or two. I think it's important enough that I'd like you to put this on paper, because that way you don't have to worry about lunging forever and trying to lunge bigger and bigger circles near your trailer. Just forget that. It's not going to be a matter of whether you can just kind of guide him in there to trot because your circle happens to end up just as he should go in there, because if that's the way you're trying to get it done, it's probably not going to be that successful. For those of you just getting on here now, I would like to just mention that there are 2 other segments that were done yesterday and on Sunday, and I will do one tomorrow afternoon at 3 East Coast time and another one at Thursday at 9 in the morning before I head out. So, looks like everybody's ready. I'm going to suggest that you oh yes, Eugenio, I've already done it, but I don't know where to direct people to it. It's in one of those. Maybe I never even put it on there. I have drawn this a few times, but I don't know where it is. Okay, I'm going to start now. You're standing on the right side of your horse, and he's in your left hand. And you're going to lead him. Now, there may be many of you with horses that you have not invested in this practice, but I suggest that you do. Because every other thing you're doing with your horse, riding him, driving him, blanketing him, greeting him, all manner of things, cleaning his feet, shoeing him, all these things do require your presence on 2 sides. There's no reason in the world you can't do what it takes. And I can make this the subject of another session at some point. There's no reason in the world that you can't actually have your horse learn how to be comfortable with you on the right side. The easiest way I know to do this is to pass the lead rope under his neck to yourself from his left shoulder, Do it a little bit closer up to his jaw so you don't have to lay all over him. Just hand that rope to yourself. Walk down the left side of his body and let that lead rope come down till you're walking the other way, and he will turn to his right, away from you, following the lead rope. And it shouldn't be something you try to yank him through with your feet still looking at him. You just start walking, and then he will change eyes on you from his left eye to his right eye by himself, following you as you take his head to the right. And then he'll pick you up out of that right eye, and it'll be his idea to follow the rope to do that. He may go ahead and put you in his left eye again directly after that, but if you do that a few times, he'll understand that it was his movement that made that happen, instead of trying to outmaneuver you as you're dancing back and forth, trying to knock his nose and shoulders and chest out of the way, because he thinks that you need to be in his left eye, because for 20 years everybody has been. So we're going to now say, here we are on the left side. So however you manage to get there, and whatever type of adjustments are necessary so that he can actually tolerate you there, you're going to be walking along. And I will also caution you, as you're walking and doing your preparation for trailer loading, that you allow your arms to swing from your shoulders just like you would if you were taking a stroll in town. Going down to look at the next, going to the movie theater, going from the restaurant to the car, whatever it is. Something happens, I'm not quite sure why, but many people will just put a 90-degree angle up between their forearm and their upper arm, and just hold on to that rope like it's going to jump out of jump out of your hands like the Easter Bunny himself. You don't need to be gripping onto that rope with a death grasp and closing down all manner of locomotion in your shoulders. Just start moving normally, because that diagonal that you have, that cadence in your own footfall, is what gives the horse the confidence to follow you in the first place. It's not real nice to look across the table at somebody and see their face twitching, or see their muscles in their jaw just grinding away, and they're not breathing, and their eyes are steely cold. That's not a rewarding experience for anybody. You don't like sitting across the table from someone who's got that type of projection and appearance and tension, and a horse sure doesn't like being around people that can't move their shoulders. That's not normal. So that stiff and rigid way is easily conveyed to the horse, and that's exactly what we don't want getting into the back of the trailer, because your arms and his hands and your hands are kind of the same. You get tight on that lead rope, why should he move them after they get on the back of the ramp? You see, this is the point. It's very hard for people to understand that the tension, the anxiety in yourself is what's conveyed to the horse more readily than any other type of learned or memorized routine that he's been taught that is connected to a function that will serve your mutual purpose, like going somewhere in a trailer or getting into a stall the way you want, whatever it is. So you're walking along and he's on your left. And you're going to go from leading to lunging in a seamless, agreeable, sort of sympathetic, smooth, mutually agreed way. As you're walking and he's behind you, without slowing your gait and without stopping your breathing or turning around to confront him, just shorten up on your lead rope a little bit and move your left hand behind your right hip bone. And if your rope is short enough and he's been taught anything on a lead rope of consequence and value, he should shift his shoulders and head and neck to the right as he's following you. And then when you have your left hand over by your right hip behind you and you open into that turn to the left, what will happen is your hand will already be in the proper position to send him in a circle to the left. You drop a coil of rope for him so that he can keep going. Otherwise, your presence turning around will just stump him to a stop. So you're going to prepare, when you bring your hand behind your hip, have a good coil or two of rope in your hand on that shorter line. Drop it to him and look behind him and help him go in that circle around you to the left. It's a visual. So you want to let him go around you to the left. You want to let him travel in that circle. You're going to look behind him. He's going to be traveling left, and you're going to be walking in a smaller concentric circle like the inside of a bicycle wheel. Your line between his halter and your left hand will be like a spoke on a wheel. So as he's going around you, you decide you want to go leading again, you just wait till his hips go past you. And you will have already taken a couple coils of rope, maybe 3 or 4 feet of rope or 2 or 3 feet of rope from your right hand. Add it to your left hand, which is out to your left past your hip. That's the direction that he needs to know about. You cannot lunge a horse with your hand at your belly button. They will come right in, or they'll stop on a circle and get heavy and get confused. You need to actually offer them direction so that they are looking at your leading rein and at your hand out of their eye, 90 degrees off their body. Certainly more subtle and less obvious types of physical and visual aids are possible as he gets more accustomed to what you mean by what you do. But it's important to remember that all of the ways that your lead rope, your lunge line are used, the more effective and accurate you are, the more he's going to understand and respect what you mean by what you do with your reins when you're back there, whether you're riding him in 2 hands or both reins in 1 hand. Either way, he's going to have a much higher regard for your ability to manage his feet and his mouth or his head if you're accurate on the ground. And if I had to add up all the pieces of paper I've been written on where people say, well, I have 1 horse on the ground and another one under saddle, that'd be a huge stack of papers I have. Unfortunately, it is the same horse, but if he's got a different idea about you, he has to have a different way of handling what you present because there's too much confusion. So now that we have discussed leading to sending to leading, I will actually, I don't know if I can do it tonight, but I will, before I go on Thursday, I will have a picture I put up there on Facebook for you. I'll add it to the, I don't know where I'll put it, but you'll find it. I'll put it up there for you. It's an important skill. It's a basic skill. This is not advanced work by any means. People would think it is if they've been kicking around the horse world for years and never heard of it. They'll think it's something new or something advanced. It's not. It's a basic tool. You lead, you lunge. You draw, you send. You approach, you stay there a while. We're going to now talk about the horses that can stand or not. Let me see what time it is. Oh gosh, I only have 16 minutes. So, 16 minutes, we're going to talk about getting that horse to stand in the trailer and how to back out properly. Okay, I'll see if I can do that. Let's think about the environments in which a horse stands normally. In a pasture with other horses, he'll stand. On a hot day under a tree, he'll stand, whether there's anybody with him or not. In a stall, he'll stand because the door is shut and he's not a jumper. That's a confined type of a standing. Cross ties, they will or won't stand, but if they do, they are confined. Hanging out with you as they graze is a good way to take the stress out of a horse that cannot stand. Let him use his head and his mouth for what it was intended, and maybe just stand there with him, with your weight on the outside foot, not the weight leaning on the inside foot next to him. You don't have to be rubbing him and scratching him and touching him. I think that, the truth be known, I think horses are not as excited about being touched in the way they are touched by most of the time. That's what I think we do for ourselves, perhaps, more than for the horses. You want to be sure a horse is appreciative of being touched. Wait until June and July when those bugs are heavy and see if you can give him some attention on his belly. Then you can be sure that'll remove all doubt. He'll like that probably quite well. There are many times when touching a horse is very reassuring and comforting to them, but I still maintain that the majority of the time that they are touched, it is because of what we do to make ourselves feel better. I will, while I'm thinking of it, mention that if you are going to do a lot of patting on your horse while you're riding him, please don't lean forward and look down. It doesn't feel real good on the shoulder blades. It doesn't help an ill-fitting saddle fit any better, and it does not help a horse keep his shoulders up as you're moving forward. The idea that you're going to have a winning round, lean forward and slap him as hard as you can on that wet, sweaty neck behind his ears up in his C1 and 2 area, that's something I would love to see an end to in the show ring. I don't know who started that fad, but it certainly wasn't something the horse thought of. It's really quite enough just for them to hear you let your air out. Maybe you want to touch them with one finger on the wither. But this, excessive patting and scratching and that a boy and this a boy and all that boy, most people are just polishing the car. If you really look at the way people move their hands on their horses, it looks like they're trying to scrub a scratch out of their car with some, scratch remover or something. I used to do it too. I'm not saying that I'm above anybody or that I don't make mistakes, but I just have been paying attention for a lot of years about what the difference between what we do for ourselves and what we do for them is really two different matters most of the time. Really two different matters. Don't polish the car. Don't wax the car and polish the windows when you're scrubbing on your horse, really. And this business here that people do all the time in the winter, you can leave that out. I only mention it because if you're trying to get a horse in the trailer, everything you can do to not disturb him further is a plus. So to get him to stand in a trailer, the first thing would be for you not to be in a hurry for him to get in or out. Let him look around. There's no time better spent with a 3 or 4 year old horse on his first visit in there than to let him take his nose all the way up, look at all the windows, smell everything in there. Cobwebs, old bees' nests, whatever you got in there. Every old piece of manure that was never taken out. If he wants to spend the time in there looking around and you are in too much of a hurry to let him do it, by golly, don't ever get upset with him for running out. Because that's a golden moment where he's going to give you his full attention. A golden moment where he can say to you, wow, did you see, wow, look over here. What in the world? And about the time they're tired of looking in one half and they've got their head and half their neck over in the other half, see if you can back them out nice and easy and let them go in there and have a look in there. If they're willing to say what's going on, what does that smell like? What is that thing? They want to lip it, chew it, push on it. I'd let them do it. That's their question answering phase. By the time you're banging down the road and they're hitting the end of that lead rope and that hay net's whacking them in the nose, it's a little too late for them to wonder what's on the roof and how does the manure of the horse that was last in there smell. And these are questions that a horse has. Okay, so now on the getting out, and I know I have not exhausted the possibilities of staying in and how to keep them in and things like this, but it's really important to remember that you learn how to read the feet and learn how to read a body, okay? And what I mean by that is, just a second, there's one question from Jen. How do I feel about leading the horse out after turning them around? I'd prefer that we stick on backing horses up for a minute. I don't like to turn a horse around in there if he can back out. And there's a reason for that. You can hyperextend their stifles. And they've been peeing and pooping in there. You don't want to see those back legs go out like a puppy on a rug at home for the first time, where they're all laid out like a little salamander. Those puppies will lay with those back feet way out behind them, 3 and 4 and 6 and 10 weeks old before they learn how to curl up like an adult dog. You don't ever want to promote that in a horse. You can actually do a lot of damage to a horse leading him out and having him lose a stifle out there and have a foot go out from under him, and he has to hobble through the rest of your weekend and maybe never get right. I don't do it. I'll back a horse out. That's what I do for a lot of reasons, but that is that's a very, very difficult injury to recover from, a sprung stifle, hyperextended stifles, let alone you have two. There are a lot of times people have horses that will drop down after a fence, and the recovery, the amount, the gymnastic efficiency that a horse that loses control of a hindquarters, one or both hindquarters after a fence, and then has to, he's already in the momentum to land and canter, and you got a hindquarters that's left out behind you like a puppy on a rug in front of the fire in your living room. The gymnastics that's required to get up from that will unseat most riders, and it will go the rest of the way to destroy a horse for future work if he's kept in work. That's what I've seen. So, unless you've got a very, very well corrugated footing so that the urine and the manure is not slick on there and going to skid that horse out from under himself, Jen, unless you know where you're unloading that horse on, or you're going to just lead him uphill out of that trailer back into some place where you can step him out onto good footing. I don't know. There's too much can go wrong with that. I know people do it all the time, but a horse that's experienced will gather himself and then hop out. They'll do the same actual. They'll drop their hips back and then kind of tiptoe out on the front end. I've seen horses go out a trailer and get back in also. A horse that really knows how to do it. I'm talking about when they're coming out front first. And they drop those hips back. They'll rock back just like they're using their hips when they're getting out backwards on a well-trained horse, an experienced horse. You can't really train them to back out as well as experience will train them once you've taught them that backing out is the deal. But part of what goes on when you've taught them how to come out front ways, this is how my friend got smashed flattered in a pancake with her ribs. They'll get in a hurry to do that. Or let's say the only way you can actually do it is to turn them to the right, and they're not horses that have ever been doubled to the right. They're not flexible enough. They're not able to make a right turn. You have to be careful in a stock trailer full of horses. Sometime I'll tell you about that load. Oh my God. I'll tell you about that load we got down in Pomona at the Equine Affair in 2006. There was that was a packed stock trailer, right, Tori? What did we have in there? I think there were 2 saddle horses, 2 colts, and 2 draft horses, right? Something like that. That was an explosion when we unloaded that one. But anyway, let's say it's a little more safe than that. You're just in there with them trying to untie horses, and you teaching them to come out front ways. You can't always control that speed, and you can't always control what side of their head you're going to stay on in there, especially if it's dark. You're sliding around on the urine and manure just like they are. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't. But let's talk about once they've committed to going out. Let's talk about once you have a horse that can pick up all 4 feet and he can clear the ground in a backup, that you've got united diagonals and you're not having to fuss around with the basics. He can back up, he can turn left or right in the backup as if you're backing an arc or backing half a circle or even a whole circle. Though I've got pictures of that on Facebook, on the drawings department, wherever it is. So, once they've started out backwards, please do not pull that rope. They are going to need to put their head down, sometimes almost to the floor, to get out. And if you're busy trying to negotiate their speed or negotiate the level of their head and neck on the way out, you are going to lead yourself to situations where you teach a horse how to pull out of there. You let him find his way. It's his feet. He's backing off an abyss. He's backing into nothing. And sometimes when a horse backs out for the first time and he feels nothing underneath that foot, that's because it wasn't a well-planned lesson. Don't make him go down 16 inches with one hind foot the first time when he's trying, or a mare's pregnant, or a baby's just so gangly that he can't figure out how to do it. You force him out backwards and he hits there and his feet go onto the trailer and he does a backward somersault. Don't make that happen now. There are a lot of things to consider here, and politeness and time and planning for the future is probably the most important, okay? So now I think I'm actually over my time limit. No, I have 3 minutes. I'd like to talk a little bit about what I'll ask your questions. You're welcome to put some questions on here. I'm going to read all these things tonight. I haven't been able to focus too much without my glasses on things, but I'll listen to this and see what I've left out. And one of the things I'd like to talk about tomorrow is how we drive, how you take turns, how you slow down, how you unload in an emergency, what kinds of phone numbers and what kinds of safety equipment you're going to need. I'll review that tomorrow a little bit, but mainly we're going to talk about driving. And then tomorrow, I'd like all of you to feel very free, very welcome to, well, I know one thing I forgot. Yeah, well, I'll do that tomorrow too. Okay, I didn't really talk about how you can get a horse how you can double a horse without riding him. Okay, I'll show you, I'll talk about that, because it's really, really important to be able to separate posture from going somewhere. A left turn where you can bring that head and neck back so that you could actually ask him to reach back to his hip bone without, or not his hip bone, let's just say the middle of his ribs where your stirrup would hang without moving his feet. You may not have the luxury of time to teach a horse how to separate all that and then get himself organized without bolting, particularly these horses that have learned how to drop a shoulder and plow out of there and leave you with a bright red hand. There are about 4 or 5 of you already who have written me and said, my horse used to load great, now he pulls away. Well, I wonder if all of you sat in a room, whether you could figure that out, what has happened that makes it go that way. Now, I have several ideas, but I'd like you really to give that some thought. And if any of you are still on here that are struggling with that problem, maybe you could put it out on Facebook tonight, on my Facebook, on this. Well, I don't really know how you make these comments, but whatever it takes to comment on this topic, please do it, and I'll read it all, and we'll talk tomorrow. And hopefully by 10 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, you guys will have some ideas what to do with your next trailer loading projects. All right? It is now exactly 4:14. I'm trying to be extremely scheduled. I dislike it, but I'm going to do it. And then also, those of you who are wondering about the events coming up in Montana, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week in Missoula, we have at the Sleeping Willow Ranch, there's an event out there with Cody Deering and company, and the nice people who run that place. And after that, and there are a few events that are already online listed, and then there are 2 in Colorado, 1 in Canada, and 1 coming up in Knutby, Sweden, that will be on the 10th through the 12th of August. Montana and, the 2 in Colorado and the 1 up in at Chris Eves' place in Ontario, that's going to be in September. So there are a few things that are still left to be done. Projects I'm working on and ways that I hope I can help in the future. But part of me being able to help and continue a momentum here is for me to get feedback and to for you to know that constructive criticism is always welcome. Answers to questions I have either not seen or not given enough thought to, I'm very happy to have presented again. Don't worry about offending me. It's a rare event. I'm not easily offended, and I'm not easily upset by people asking questions in different ways or again and again. I have a lot of things on my mind, and sometimes it just doesn't get through. So don't hesitate, please, to make a bigger effort to get my attention. If I seem to be ignoring you, it's not intentional.